to restore old military graves to their original state.
Yeah, Steve's been visiting forgotten memorials like this one and using just basic cleaning materials and good old-fashioned elbow grease, returned to them, look at that, to their former glory.
Yeah. Well, along the way, he has discovered some remarkable stories of those who gave their lives for their country, as Graham Satchell reports.
In the solemn stillness of a country churchyard, Steve Davis is heading to his latest project. He starts by using a brush, washing up liquid and elbow grease.
It's a work of art, and I think to myself, that needs, needs to be cleaned and remembered. You're bringing back a story, a life of someone who has defended the country, and I get a buzz out of that. Yeah, I agree. I get more of a buzz out of anything.
Steve is a former soldier, served in Northern Ireland. He started restoring military graves by chance after a family christening.
I just happened to come out of the church first, and as I looked to my right, I saw a Commonwealth War grave completely grown over with weeds. And I thought, that's not right, that shouldn't be like that. So my wife and I came back the next day, we cleared all the weeds. 6 months later, I'd done 144, all within a 10-mile radius of where I lived. I find them, I renovate them, I seek permission, and then I revisit them every 2 or 3 years and re-clean them.
Steve always takes before and after photos of the graves he restores. The transformations are quite something.
I love doing the short videos and reels, which we speed up, and I put great music to them. Look for the William Tell one on TikTok, that's really funny.
Steve funds most of the work himself through a Just Giving page, the Military Grave Restorer. He has 2 volunteer researchers who try to find the stories behind the headstones.
I found a bugler from the charge of the Light Brigade, the last survivor of Rorke's Drift, Colour Sergeant Bourne, the last survivor of the Battle of Waterloo, Private Samuel Gibson in Caterham Cemetery. All these people are out there who lay dirty and in a disgusting state. So we bring it back to life.
This is the grave of Private Lanfried, now lovingly restored by Steve. He sounded the bugle at the charge of the Light Brigade in 1854. Steve's team discovered an extraordinary recording of him, made in 1890.
I am now going to sound the bugle and sound the charge on that very same bugle.
In Beckenham, the grave of Colour Sergeant Bourne, again restored. His courage at the Battle of Rorke's Drift immortalised in the film Zulu by the actor Nigel Green.
The sentries report Zulus to the southwest. Thousands of them.
Back in the cemetery, Lee Dennis is visiting the grave of his son Harry, who died in a traffic accident last year.
We struggle, obviously, for losing Harry. He was only 11 years old. It was a week before Christmas. It couldn't have been a more tragic accident. Difficult. It's the only way I can describe it, really. Very difficult, day by day. But we'll get there. I'm sure we will.
Lee visits his son's grave every day. He started to notice military headstones in the cemetery. He already followed Steve on Facebook and decided to send him a message.
He said, "Oh, I'm only in Hawkhurst. Do you want to meet tomorrow?" And that was it. Steve came down and he was like, "Right." He was quite forthright. "Right, do you want to help me clean them up then?" And I was like, and I've been doing it ever since.
Do you want to push it back in just for the moment while we're doing the stone?
Go on. She's heavy.
Come on, put it back into it. Yay.
I get great pleasure from doing it. And I don't think about my everyday life and my everyday struggles. I'm just there and I'm scrubbing and I'm on my own. Steve's directing me, which he's very good at doing. And he says I've become quite a good apprentice. So he just he gives me direction and he leads me to it. The graves I'm cleaning, most of them were young people that passed, obviously, and they passed before their parents, they passed fighting the war for us as we are now. And I feel like I'm doing my bit for their parents as well, if that makes sense. I'd like to think that someone maybe in 100 years' time will clean Harry's grave for me.
But it's a beautiful stone, and that will shine.
Steve and Lee are almost done for the day. The writing on the headstone is now starting to become legible. Steve takes photos to send to his researcher.
To see the lettering become clear, so we now know who he is, what he did. We can now go and research him and hopefully find family and his obituary and find the research. Gives me loads of pleasure. That will look nice by the weekend.
Okay.
For both Steve and Lee, this has become a kind of therapy, restoring the graves and resurrecting the stories of forgotten heroes.
What an amazing job they are doing. And we're delighted to say that Steve Davis joins us now on the sofa. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
This is quite something. This is quite something. A lot of people getting in touch this morning saying how moved they are, but how grateful they are for what you're doing, especially lots of those families.
Yes. I only started it. I started 5 years ago when I went to the christening of my niece's daughter, and I discovered a grave which was overgrown of an 18-year-old who died a month before the armistice, and he was in my old regiment. My regiment was the Royal Green Jackets. The antecedent regiment was the Rifle Brigade, and I said to my wife, "We need to come back and sort this out." And about 6 months later, within a 10-mile radius, I'd done a lot. Then I discovered my first Victoria Cross grave in Dover, which was completely filthy. I've now done 37 Victoria Cross graves, which I maintain, and about 600 military graves now. A lot by myself, but I start to involve military charities like Op Nova, past and present. So I work a lot with them, who work with guys in the criminal justice system. And I work with regimental associations and do some work for them, especially Royal Engineers Association at the moment. So yes, it's becoming really interesting, but I'm getting a bit old for it. My hope is to get people to do what I do and have some people around the country so that I'm not having to move around so much.
You clearly feel quite a big responsibility to do this, to take this on, to keep it going.
It's almost an anger. When you walk into a cemetery like Hove, there are some amazing people in there who lay there dirty and forgotten, and they're all at that age. They're almost generally white marble, but you'd never know that. You'd never know. I mean, that one behind the Charles John Slaughter, that is one piece of marble stone. It's a work of art.
And how did you restore that? What did you do with this one?
I'm pretty slow. I'm very slow and gentle. I start with water. I start with a dry natural bristle brush. Then I introduce water with a brush, sometimes a bit of very liquid. And then depending on what sort of stone it is, a cleaner. I try and use an environmentally friendly cleaner. Sometimes kills the grass for a few days, but it all grows back. It's very hardy.
I guess you have to be really careful, don't you? Because some of this
absolutely.
stone is very old and very precious.
Sandstone's very difficult. That takes a long time to clean because I'm using a toothbrush, around the lettering, so I don't damage the lettering.
And when you're working on the graves, how much do you know about the person?
The process is I go to a graveyard, look at them, sort of work out who they are. Generally send some info to Hilary Chalice, who does the main research, or Jane Robinson, who finds the families. They'll give me an idea of what, how, who, when. I'll have already gained permission from the cemetery owner, which is generally a council or a vicar. And then I'll go through the cleaning process. We try and contact the family. I call up, say, you haven't won the lottery and I'm not from Air Hunters. And I say that we've discovered a grave of your ancestor. About half of them had no idea they existed or where they existed. And we sort of put that back together again.
You talk about those families.
Yeah.
You mentioned your wife. What does she and your family think of the fact that you spend all these hours doing this?
Well, we went on holiday to Jersey and I cleaned 3 Victoria Cross graves whilst there.
On holiday?
Yeah. So She supports me, of course she does. And my children are brilliant. Anna, my eldest, lives in Singapore with her husband Sam. They do all my sort of social media thing. Everything comes under Military Grave Restorer. So nobody else has got that moniker, if you like.
How therapeutic is it?
For me, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
The thrill, and it is a thrill, of a completed grave, when I walk back or I put a cross back on, is you can't calculate it. And for guys like myself, veterans with mental health issues, to see their faces light up and say, I did that. There's a guy who helps me in Great Yarmouth, when his wife says to the guy that runs it, when he comes home after that, for the next 2 weeks, he's as happy as a man playing in a sandpit. He can't wait for the next one. So it does do things. It's not for everyone. Not many people, not everyone wants to walk into a graveyard and start looking at the dead. There are trigger points, obviously. But yeah, it seems to work.
Well, well done to you, Steve, and to Lee, who we saw in the film working with you. It clearly means a huge amount and helps him too.
Yes.
As well as all those families.
It takes, fortunately, for those times we're cleaning the graves, it takes his mind off the tragic loss of his son.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you very much.
It's a fascinating and an incredibly worthwhile project.